everyone. Welcome, welcome. We hope you're having a great week. We are super excited about our topic today. So our title for this podcast is What's Your Dental Boogeyman? And this is something that Brittany and I are really, really passionate about. So this is going to be a good one. So when we think of dental boogeymen, I think our brain goes right to what are our patients scared of? We deal with anxiety and patients coming in fearful all the time. And so we're always trying to think about how do we manage that really well. And I think that'll probably be a future podcast for us. Mm-hmm. But what we're talking about today is what is your personal dental boogeyman as a provider for care to your patients and to your teammates. So, we sometimes walk around, I think all of us walk around with these unknown fears or these self-limiting thoughts that we don't even realize that we're carrying with us. And that influences everything we say and do in our life and obviously in our practices. And so we want to kind of dig into that today because fear is one of those things, those crazy, crazy things. It's insane to me that we get scared of things and we get so scared that we won't step out of them because we're scared of what that might feel like. It's crazy to me that we fear and it keeps us stuck.
Certainly does.
It's paralyzed. And, we can kind of think that from a one-sided aspect of I feel scared and this is affecting me. But what we got to keep in mind is this is affecting our patients and the care that they're getting and receiving from us. So it's something we have to talk about and we have to really dig into. And I have just a little anecdotal story. I know we all have our things, but when I was a kid, I had this recurring dream that there were snakes all around me and all over me. And I would wake up terrified, sweating. I would wake up and I had a little lamp by my bed and I would turn my lamp on and I would pull my blankets up super, super tight across me because if there was any kind of crease or wrinkle in the sheet or in the blanket, I felt like that was actually a real snake. And I would just, I'd lay there for hours, just keep repetitively pulling that blanket flat, and I knew that realistically there were no snakes. But I was so terrified to physically get out of my bed and go to my parents' room because of what that fear had done in my brain. And it was so unrealistic because there were literally no snakes in my bed, but it physically kept me there terrified for hours. And it was all in my head.
Right. And I think that the key, one of the keys in that anecdote too, is that it kept you paralyzed.
Yes.
So if you would have examined the fear and gone to the root of it and asked all the why questions and kind of dove in, if, and you were a kid, so obviously we don't have these tools and the awareness and whatever, but it will keep us paralyzed if we don't kind of look into it and examine it and realize this is an automatic negative thought. We call those ants, ANT, right. Automatic negative thought that I've never intentionally examined, and that's really what keeps us paralyzed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I actually have an anecdote on that too. Thanks for sharing that story because as a kid, I had a very maybe different childhood than Charissa. I actually had snakes as pets, along with pigs and goats and iguanas and all kinds of turtles and all kinds of stuff. But I grew up with snakes as pets, as weird as that sounds. And there was a time, I live in South Florida and I'm born and raised in South Florida. Proud to say and a little bit scared to share actually because Florida man stories are headlining these days. So there was, I have to tell this I'm sorry, it's too good not to share. There was a hurricane coming to Florida when I was a teenager, and my sisters and I, with the big hearts that we had as kids before we were jaded adults, were we have to save all the animals in our yard. And so we found all the snakes, frogs, and lizards that we could, and we put them all in this little turtle tank. And, the only downside to this turtle tank was that it didn't have a lid. So we used these really finagled, not so rigid pieces of thin wood, and we put it on top of the tank and left them a little air hole. And we had 33, we counted, between the frogs, the lizards, and the snakes in this terrarium. I know I'm freaking some people out. They're like, oh my God,
I'm
you
so
had
glad
this.
We were not neighbors.
I know. I can see you getting so uncomfortable. This is the kicker though. This is the kicker. Okay. My sisters and I were we are saints. We are saving the animals. Okay. So the hurricane comes. I'm sleeping on the couch because I think our power was out and it's hot. So I'm sleeping on the couch. My older sister comes to me in the middle of the night and she goes, Brittany, the frogs escaped. all of the frogs and the lizards and the snakes were loose in our house, and we were like, it was the middle of the night, it was pitch black, and I was dying laughing, and we like scrambled to find them because we knew that we would be in so much trouble. But this is what just step into my childhood, so you can understand when I share the anecdotes from my childhood, it was a little funky growing up. It was a super special situation, but I could not share that story because welcome to Florida, welcome to my childhood, welcome to life, welcome to welcome to the weirdness of Waxahachie.
I feel like in the universe, you were like the catalyst for my nightmares.
You know, you're welcome for that because I think you're an amazing person. So I think that probably people like me influence.
I will say we will never have a snake as a pet in our house, but I don't have that recurring dream anymore. So
but doesn't it feel good to know that your friend, if ever a snake is in your vicinity, will probably catch it and
yes. So now we absolutely should be neighbors.
Yeah, for sure. And the frogs too. Don't worry about the frogs. I got you.
I got
you.
Either. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, let's get to the real stuff. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. I had to dive into there. But let's get into what we are actually going to dive into today. And Charissa, did you have more to that story?
No. That was it.
Okay. So
I get me stuck.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yes. And it definitely can. I can 100% relate to that. And you know, one thing I think a fear that we all experienced really recently was, especially as quote unquote, you know, non-essential medical personnel, you know, I think that's an interesting way to put it. You know, of course we're essential. It's just
right.
I don't know. It made me realize how we're kind of perceived.
Right.
But also it set us up for something in regards to the COVID situation last year. I know that all of our offices were mandated to close, and that was a really uncertain and scary situation. So talk about fear, you know,
right.
Fear of all the unknown, fear of like, what is this? How long is it going to last? How are we all going to make it through, you know, with all this loss and all this change and the things that we don't have control and power over. So I, in that period of time, discovered someone who's become very influential in my life since that point, and his name is Jay Shetty. And I know that Charissa knows I'm like his biggest fan, and Charissa is also one of his big fans too. I absolutely love him. He did 40 days of meditation on Facebook during the pandemic when everything was really, you know, crap was hitting the fan like crazy. We were all shut down. We were stuck in quarantine. You know, when everything was still fresh and new, and really there's a lot more uncertainty maybe than there is now. And I understand there's still a lot of uncertainty. There's still a lot of, you know, unknowns, but I think we're all kind of a little more adjusted at this point. But this was early in 2020 that I'm talking about. So I happened to stumble upon one of his meditations, his free meditations on Facebook. And I was going through a really hard time mentally, emotionally. There were other things going on in my life. And he just really helped me through a really hard time. You know, I did every single day of the meditations. I do them multiple times a day, you know, went for walks outside, kind of just, I ended up pre-ordering his book, which came out, I believe, in August of last year. But some of his resources, his, you know, trainings and his podcast and his different things have just been really influential in my life. And I know that they are in Charissa's as well. So since we're kicking off, oh, by the way, Jay Shetty has like millions of followers. He doesn't need a plug from us, but we just love him so much and wanted to share kind of some of his resources and what an amazing person he is. So he's actually a former monk. He's only 33, but he's a former monk. He was a monk for, I believe, 3 years, and then decided that he could have a lot of influence on our modern day world with monk ancient kind of wisdom by coming back and re-immersing himself into quote unquote normal, you know, life. And I think he's had a huge impact in the world. I know he's had a huge impact on me. So really thankful for that and his influence and his willingness to share his experiences with the world. But that being said, I wanted to share an excerpt that I think is just like mind-boggling from his book. It's called appropriately Think Like a Monk. And the excerpt is about fear, of course, because that's our topic today. So I'm just going to read that. And I promise you it's worth the listen. So please hang in there as I read through this, because we're going to dive right into what our unique and common fears are and how we can kind of overcome them and the things that we can do to work past them right after this. So in his book, in the chapter 3 called Fear, he says, "We have so much to offer the world, but fear and anxiety disconnect us from our abilities. This is because growing up, we were taught directly or indirectly that fear is negative. Don't be scared, our parents told us. Scaredy cat, our friends teased. Fear was an embarrassing, humiliating reaction to be ignored or hidden. But fear has a flip side, which Tom Hanks alluded to in his commencement address at Yale University. Fear, he told graduates, will get the worst of the best of us. The truth is, we'll never live entirely without fear and anxiety. We'll never be able to fix our economic, social, and political climates to entirely eliminate conflict and uncertainty, not to mention our everyday interpersonal challenges. And that's okay, because fear isn't bad, it's simply a warning flag. Your mind's saying, this doesn't look good. Something might go wrong. It's what we do with that signal that matters. We can use our fear of the effects of climate change to motivate us to develop solutions, or we can allow it to make us feel overwhelmed and helpless and do nothing as a result. Sometimes fear is a critical warning to help us survive true danger, but most of the time what we feel is anxiety related to everyday concerns about money, jobs, and relationships. We allow anxiety, everyday fear, to hold us back by blocking us from our true feelings. The longer we hold on to fears, the more they ferment until eventually they become toxic. We let our fear drive us, but fear itself is not our real problem. Our real problem is that we fear the wrong things. What we should really fear is that we will miss the opportunities that fear offers. Gavin de Becker, one of the world's leading security experts in The Gift of Fear, calls it calls it a brilliant internal guardian that stands ready to warn you of hazards and guide you through risky situations. Often, we notice fear's warning but ignore its guidance. If we learn how to recognize what fear can teach us about ourselves and what we value, then we can use it as a tool to obtain greater meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in our lives. We can use fear to get to the best of us. We can use fear to get to the best of us. A few decades ago, scientists conducted an experiment in the Arizona desert where they built Biosphere 2, a huge steel and glass enclosure with air that had been purified, clean water, nutrient-rich soil, and lots of natural light. It was meant to provide ideal living conditions for the flora and fauna within. And while it was successful in some ways, in one, it was an absolute failure. Over and over, when trees inside the biosphere grew to a certain height, they would simply fall over. At first, the phenomenon confused scientists. Finally, they realized that the biosphere lacked a key element necessary to the tree's health: wind. In a natural environment, trees are buffeted by wind. They respond to that pressure and agitation by growing stronger bark and deeper roots to increase their stability. We waste a lot of time and energy trying to stay in the comfortable bubble of our self-made biospheres. We fear the stresses and challenges of change, but those stresses and challenges are the wind that makes us stronger. So that's just an excerpt. It's pages like 46 to 50 in Jay Shetty's book, Think Like a Monk. I've read this book and reread this book and reread this book, and I just highlighted the heck out of it. But that's one of my favorite excerpts, and I felt it was very appropriate for what we're sharing on today, Charissa.
Absolutely. I really like that the context and the concept of the biosphere and the trees. Because we spend a lot of time and energy, trying to avoid the hard, trying to avoid the uncomfortable, just kind of staying, kind of shut off and hiding from the things that scare us. And what we don't realize is, just like those trees, they need that wind, they need that push, they need some difficulty to grow those roots and be really strong and be really fortified.
Yeah.
And so, and the reality is, no matter how much time we spend trying to avoid them, they're still going to come. So
they're still always bubbling beneath the surface is the thing. It's like the longer we, try and evade the pain of facing our actual emotions, the longer that they're going to bubble beneath the surface. And that's when they become debilitating. That's when they become problematic instead of empowering,
Right.
like you mentioned, fear. I think that, I really dislike when people say, oh, positive and negative emotions. Like, I get it. I get that, like, when you're happy, you're secreting dopamine and like you feel, it's positive. It's a positive experience type of thing. And maybe fear doesn't feel like a positive experience, but it is a part of life. So for me, like, I think it's a really important distinction that we say, there aren't really negative emotions except for the ones that are debilitating. Like when I think of someone who's been through like trauma or something, and they have just like, they're debilitated by their experience, like terror, feelings of hatred, feelings of, those really like strong, disempowering emotions are the only negative ones in my opinion. Like, I think that it's normal. It's a normal part of the human experience to experience sadness,
Yes.
fear, anger, like we need to explore all those things, because if we ignore them and just kind of like give in to society's expectations that we quote unquote should be happy, we should always be happy. We make it like right and wrong when it's not. It's just, we're all on this journey, like we say all the time. It's just we're all experiencing all of those things, and it's just the denial that gets us in trouble. So it's the denial of fear, in my opinion, that gets us in trouble.
So what's crazy to me is I think sometimes, and I think you and I have a special window into this, is sometimes it's denial, like you say, and sometimes it's just complete lack of awareness. Like we don't even really know that it's happening.
Right.
And I feel like we have a window in this because we do get to be team leads in our practice. So we get to work with other hygienists and get to talk to them. And, this year I'm kind of stepping into that role, and I'm getting to talk to some of my hygienists, or all of my hygienists. And it's so interesting to like listen in the background of what's actually going on and what's keeping people from moving forward. So I want to talk about some of the common fears that we have just as people, and then some of the unique fears that we have from in the dental aspect, in the dental world, because I think acknowledging those and bringing those to light is the first step into getting past those. So obviously, I think number one core, I think across the board for everyone is like, everybody wants to be liked, right?
Yep.
Nobody wants to be disliked. Nobody wants to give bad news. Nobody wants to disappoint anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is just, that's like common across the board for most humans. And I think that plays, it kind of grows roots into the dental background of, like I had one of our hygienists say, well, I get really nervous. Like, what if insurance doesn't cover this? And it's like, well, why would that scare you? But when you really start digging down, it's because, well, what if it turns out that patient is angry at me, that they have to pay more, and now they feel like I made a bad choice for them. And it comes back to, what if that patient doesn't like me?
Right.
Or what I said and what we did.
Yeah. And I like that you're digging into this specific example, because it reminds me of what we were just talking about before we officially pressed the go button on this podcast. And that is the continuous, like, why question.
Yeah.
Like, why do I think that? Where is that coming from? And diving deep enough to see, like, oh, that's the root fear there. That's the root cause. Like, okay, that, there's a lot of quote unquote branches that stem from that root. So addressing the root problem, which is that fear of not being liked,
right,
is essential.
And then I think there's the aspect too of, I want people to like me, so I don't want to upset anyone. So we don't want to upset our patients with bad news. We don't want to upset our doctors with maybe not doing the best job or not producing enough. We don't want to upset our team members and let them down. So I think we just carry a lot of this all day, and it like keeps us from actually getting to the whole reason we're there. Mm-hmm. I think we sometimes fear being misunderstood, or that we can't communicate effectively, not being good enough. I feel like there's a big comparison trap there that we fall into. You're like, well, she produced this and I only produced this, or he did that and I only did this. And like then you don't even put yourself out there because you're scared to be compared. I know not having all the answers is a big thing for people. Nobody wants to look or feel like they're stupid. And like, we're such big proponents for, we're all at different stages of this journey. So in my brain, there is no such thing as being stupid. Like, you just don't know yet. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of that. I think those are a lot of common human fears.
Yeah. I think they're common human fears, but I also think that some of those are common, in hygiene and in dentistry. Like, right. To me, those are the common like dental hygiene fears, to be honest with you. Yeah. And some of them are definitely like common across the board, everyone in every field,
right. Well, I think those are common across the board. And then I think it manifests different in hygiene.
Yeah, agreed.
So I think in hygiene, like I've heard this before, and I know you have too, is like, well, I don't want to come across as being salesy, or I don't want to come across as being pushy.
Right.
And that when you really get down to the root of it, it's like, well, I don't want people to think I'm stupid, or I don't want people to think that I'm pushy, or they're not going to like me because I'm, being pushy.
Yeah.
So I think, that, the whole thing was like, what if insurance doesn't cover this? When you really get to the bottom of it, it's like, I don't want somebody to be mad at me or not like me because
Right.
of what I suggested.
Yeah. And when we, I think that it's important to say too that when we're talking about some of these automatic fears or negative thoughts, some of them are really old, right? Some of them have been just like, they've been sitting there, they've been running the show, they've been unexamined for years and years. They come from childhood or they come from past experiences. They're just kind of automatic at this point. So it's really important that like we pause and take a moment and maybe whip out like a pad of paper and a pen. Like for me, I know that writing things down helps me to process things. I think that goes for a lot of people, like taking notes helps you to remember better, I think it helps point out what's really going on when it might seem all like jumbled in our heads,
right.
like because these things, if they're unexamined and they've just been there in the background, it's like you don't have consciousness, you don't have eyes on that, you're not focusing on that. It's just kind of there showing up. So in order to make a switch and break that pattern interrupt, we've got to do something a little bit different and very intentional, right? So I think that the first thing is maybe ask yourself the question and maybe even write down, what are your common fears? So some of the ones that Charissa just listened or just listed, what are some common fears? What do I think that maybe a lot of my colleagues struggle with as well? Where do we all kind of, what do we all have in common in regards to our fears? Maybe write some of those down, and then maybe write some of your personal fears that can have to do with your personal life, your professional life, and your self-limiting beliefs. I know for me, I can share just one of my personal experiences. One of my self-limiting beliefs that I know has been there since childhood. I actually have two really deep-seated ones that I know have affected me professionally. The first one is, it doesn't matter if I show up. So I had this belief, since childhood, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter if I show up. Like, I'm not going to make an impact either way. No one's going to miss me. It doesn't matter, So I've always felt like when I get an invitation somewhere or when I'm expected to be somewhere, it doesn't really matter. Like, no one's going to feel the impact of whether I come or go. And there's not going to be really any, I don't know, like I just don't make an impact when I'm present or absent. But that's absolutely false. We're all making ripples. We're all leading in our own ways. We're all making an impact, whether we know it or not, and whether the impact is positive or not. We're all, our presence or absence is crucial to what goes on in a certain situation. Right. And depending on how active we want to be and present we want to be in any situation, it can be absolutely like, it can be make or break. It can make or break our hygiene teams and departments. It can make or break our patients' lives. It can be very impactful. So when I look at that belief, I can kind of see, for me, where it comes from. Instead of just thinking like, oh, I don't want to think that. Of course, when you think, I don't want to think about grapes, you're thinking about grapes. Like, you can't just say, oh, I don't want to think about snakes, or, then you're thinking about snakes. You can't just say, I don't want to think about that. You have to say, how am I going to replace this automatic negative thought? This ant in my head kind of thing. Right. And one of the ways that I replace that is by just thinking through all, like, intentionally. And this is, by the way, this is uncomfortable stuff. So I don't mean to like make this light at all, or make it, seem like this is easy and it doesn't feel like wonky when you're in it. But man, coming out on the other side just feels so good and so empowering that I think it's absolutely worth it. So if you're kind of like starting this list and you're like, ew, just know that we all feel that way when we look at ourselves and, like, we're looking at all this stuff. So, so how do we combat something like, it doesn't matter if I show up? So, for me, I looked back at all the times that I did and didn't show up, and looked at the impact that actually had. When I did show up, like, the things that happened were either positive or negative, but there was an impact. So I couldn't deny that there was an impact when I showed up. And when I didn't show up, there was an impact, either positive or negative. People let me know. I'd hear about it after the fact or during. People would text me, be like, "Hey, where are you?" So it actually mattered. I could see that the truth was that it actually mattered. So to combat that, like, it does matter if I show up. My presence matters. My absence matters. What I do matters. What I do and don't do matters. So, so it helps me to remember to show up, or at least RSVP.
Well, and this is a really good point for, like, our patients absolutely have to have us show up, not just physically, but mindfully. Like, we have to be present. We have to be really mindful of what their needs are, and taking the assessments and being able to put the treatment plans together. And if we're not actively being present in that, they're not getting the best of us. They're not getting the best care they need. So it's absolutely imperative that we show up.
We show up in every way, like you're saying. Yeah. Not just physically. So physically was my first barrier.
Right. Yeah.
And then afterwards, yes, it's mentally, emotionally, like connectively present, be present kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. And then another one of my personal self-limiting beliefs, or actually it's a fear of mine. And I know that I'll talk about how this has impacted me, and I think how it impacts a lot of providers, is I have this fear of not being believed. So I had a lot of experiences in childhood that were, and again, I don't mean to get so deep. It's just, I love psychology, and I like to see where all this stuff comes from.
This is where a lot of it comes from. Absolutely. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Because it's when you develop your worldview and your beliefs, it's like what you learn in childhood becomes that's the way the world is, but it's not always the case. It's just, it remains unexamined for most people. So for me, not being believed is a big fear. And I had a lot of experiences when I was a kid, when I was actually telling the truth and I wasn't believed, or I was accused of being not truthful, so so it's so funny. I think of this situation all the time. I think I've actually told you this, when it's like a guilt thing when I'm not guilty. Like I'll be shopping and there will be like a security guard at the door and I'm leaving and I know that I've paid for everything that I have and I feel like I'm going to get busted and I'm not doing anything wrong. It's like this guilt feel like I'm not going to be believed. Like it's so irrational, but these are the things that like keep us stuck, like it's so irrational. Like I know that I've paid for everything. I know that whatever, but I still feel like guilty about something, and it's just not rational. This doesn't make sense. So my fear of not being believed too. There was a situation when I was a kid. I'm actually legally blind in my right eye. It's basically like a useless eye. It's a lazy eye. It doesn't see. It doesn't correct all the way. And my left eye is not much better. My left eye, I'm not legally blind, but I have terrible vision. So we're very strong contacts, and my left eye basically does all the work. But when I was a kid, we didn't discover this until I was like 6 or 7 years old. So I was in elementary school, and I remember being in the library, and they used to, for whatever reason, do like screenings with our teachers, like, hey, cover this eye, we're going to read the thing, and whatever. So I just remember this happening in elementary school, and my teacher said, hey, it's your turn. Okay, cover this eye. And, we did my left eye first, and I could see pretty well at that point in my left eye. I didn't have really any issues. So I read the whole thing, and then we switched it so that I was looking out of my right eye and I couldn't see. And I said, I know, I just saw it. So I know that that's a big E, but I can't see it. So I can't see like the giant E at the top of the chart. That's how bad it is.
Right.
So I was telling the truth, I was like, I know what it is, but I literally can't see it. And the teacher was like, yes, you can, and started yelling at me and made me cry. And it was just such a traumatic situation, because I was like, no, I swear, like I'm being truthful in the situation. And then I went home and actually got in trouble for not being able to see as well. So this just reinforced this, so these things, have happened to all of us. We can all kind of think back to these situations and be like, oh, that's where that came from. Oh, this is really irrational in this point in my life, but the not being believed thing in hygiene is a huge thing for me, because I am like, perio, first of all, perio doesn't hurt until it's advanced, or if it's nug or nup or like something acute, but generally none of our patients come to us and say, oh, my gums hurt. Like my bone, I think my bone's going away. Like, I don't think it's there anymore. Like no one says that. No one comes to the dentist like, can you fix my gums?
Pockets. Can you check those?
Yeah, I have some periodontal pockets. I think I have some issues. Will you check my gums? Like no one's ever said those words to me.
Right.
So not being believed, here's this disease that a ton of our patients have that doesn't cause them pain, that doesn't cripple them in any way until it's advanced, or at least they don't know that it is. It's like OSA, like a ton of comorbidities, but they don't necessarily connect the dots until we connect the dots for them and explain, right? So they come in, they don't have pain. I tell them they have periodontal disease. These are all the things that I just examined and assessed and uncovered, and this is what's going on in your body. And then the patient, for their own reasons, they have their own human experiences and their biases and whatever,
their own fears,
own fears, and are like, you're trying, and this has happened, if we're honest, like someone has said, I don't appreciate that you're trying to sell me this, and I'm like, no, that's not it at all, like, and of course my fear is triggered of like not being believed when I'm here telling the truth, actually putting a lot of effort and time into doing what's best for you,
Right.
So I think I think that's a common fear.
Agreed, for sure. And I think, I'm one of those silver linings girls. Like I can find the positive in everything. And so like, as I hear you telling me this, like for real. That is like legit. I understand, like, it's very clear where that came from, and it's understandable why that can be debilitating. And I totally see how it applies to hygiene. But I would say the silver lining is you have become a really excellent educator, because you want to show the patient proof. Like, you're like, I'm not just going to tell you this, I'm going to show you this.
Right.
So it's made you, that's your wind. That's been your wind, tree girl. And that's made you stronger and grow deeper roots and become a really great educator for your patients. So this is the beauty of, if you can get to the root of that fear, figure out why you have it and how to move forward from it, you will actually come out stronger. And I feel like I want to share a little one of mine too, growing up. And you're so right. Like, I feel like everything comes from childhood. I feel like every person in the world should have some sort of therapy, because you don't know what you don't know. Like, you grew up in this one little bubble and you don't really know what's outside of it. So I just think, we kind of got to look out and see what reality really is.
I cannot agree more. Everyone, like, literally everyone needs to go to therapy. Everyone should work in a restaurant in their life, and everyone needs to go to therapy. That's
agree.
Yes.
But for me growing up, and this wasn't even a negative thing, I don't feel like, but my mom was very frugal. She was really good with finances. She was really good with money, but she was very frugal and very tight. We hardly ever went out to dinner. She was this amazing cook, and she would actually have a menu. She wrote out 2 weeks at a time on the side of the fridge, like the main dish, the sides, everything. So you could go.
Oh my gosh.
It was pretty amazing. I grew up military family, so she would go shopping for 2 weeks at a time at the commissary. But anyway, so we didn't go out to eat very often. And when we did, like, it was like just known, you didn't ask, you're not getting soda, you can only drink water, because we weren't going to spend the money on getting soda. And so growing up in that, like, I didn't think that was weird or abnormal, but it was just like one of those things, like, you didn't ask for soda, which cost, back then probably 75 cents, $1
Right.
maybe. Like, so that kind of set my mindset of like being frugal and not spending money. And it's really funny, because when I started dating my husband and we'd go out, I'd always order water. And he's like, do you like water? Do you want water? He's like, if you want to get soda or a tea or something, get what you want. And it was interesting, because I had to kind of break through that to be like, oh, I can get whatever I want to drink.
Yeah.
But anyway, carrying that forward, like, you carry that into your practice of like, oh my gosh, I can't present this to the patient. This is an extra $400, or this is expensive.
Yeah.
This is going to cost them. Like, they don't want to spend money. Like, they don't have any money to spend on this. And you're carrying all those fears and all those self-limiting thoughts that you don't even realize. And then it keeps you from presenting what they actually need or could benefit from, because you're making that decision for them. Like, you've got their pocketbook in your own brain,
right?
And you're making that decision. So you're not even presenting what they could benefit from and letting them make that decision. And that's such a dangerous thing. Yeah. And I did that so much in the beginning until I really realized, like, whoa, I can't make that decision for them.
Yeah. You're disempowering patients because of our own fear.
Yeah.
So thank you for saying that. I actually want to touch on something that I talked about in our inaugural podcast, as Dr. Craig would say, about Ashley's situation, but I'm going to touch on it again, because I think that it's very relatable and common. I think that we've all kind of been here. So I want to share about it again, just in case someone missed that. So I actually do all the quarterly reviews for a hygienist. We review qualitative and quantitative goals, clearly on a quarterly basis. And we were, Ashley is an incredible hygienist. I've worked with her for a lot of years. Before she was a hygienist, she was an assistant for like 8 years, and has amazing connection and rapport with her patients. She's like obsessed with hygiene. She's really smart, graduated top of her class kind of thing. But she's been a hygienist now, I think, for 3 years. So still relatively fresh out, and quote unquote new to the field. So I think struggling with something that we all have struggled with at some point. So we were doing one of Ashley's quarterly reviews. And upon reviewing, one of the things we do during that review is we do a procedure count. And the procedure count is really to shine a light on what we're doing and what resources are at our disposal that we are using, and which ones are at our disposal that we aren't using, and are we doing what's best for the patient according to their needs, and kind of just helps us to keep things in perspective and remember the tools that we actually have on hand in our tool belt, so that we're not like leaving things out, and that we're providing patients with the very best care is the point. And for a lot of people, I think that can be kind of like sounds scary, like, oh God, you review the numbers, like, yeah, I review the numbers, and it's really cool to see how the numbers develop from period to period. And since we started doing these reviews, providers have gotten like really excited about them. They're like, I can't wait to see like what have I done, and what am I using, and what do I need to improve on, and like it becomes this really exciting thing. So anyway, Ash and I were having this review, and we were talking about PerioProtect. And PerioProtect is this tray system. It's basically like an oxygen chamber for your patient's gums. And of course, that eliminates anaerobes because it forces oxygen to the bottom of the pockets, and it helps perio disease to remain latent or inactive for a longer period of time. So Charissa and I love PerioProtect. She's the one who actually originally introduced me to it, and now we're all obsessed with it at Spodak. But when it was newer there, Ashley was really struggling with communicating the value to her patients and enrolling people in PerioProtect, even though she had done the research and she had looked at all the stuff and really believed in it and really loved it and was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And it's because she had certain beliefs that had remained unexamined for a long time. So I rarely digress and go off on a tangent. I love sticking with agendas because I feel like I want to respect everyone's time and make sure we get accomplished what we wanted to. But this was an instance where we intentionally went off the agenda, and I said, Ashley, this is a huge roadblock for you. Like we need to explore this. Like we need to dive in right now. So we did. We took a minute, and I was just asking her some questions. I think we all need someone else who has an external perspective to question us sometimes. So I really trust, like Charissa and I do this for each other all the time. We're like, wait, is that, do you really believe that? Like, where's that coming from? And Charissa does this for me. And it's really interesting when you have a friend who cares enough to help you see objectively what that can do, So in this instance, that was me for Ashley. So I said, hey, what are you afraid of in this situation? And she was like, well, I'm afraid that my patients will think that I'm like trying to sell them something, and I know that there's such this negative connotation about quote unquote selling. So we can think of it as an exchanging of goods, a providing of services that patients actually need and actually will benefit them. We can think of it as offering a service and giving people empowerment and the ability to choose. We can think of it like that because that's what it actually is in healthcare. If we're ethical providers and we really believe in what we're doing, we don't have to feel guilty and bad about quote unquote selling. We want to sell what the patient should have because they should have it. It's going to benefit them and make them healthier and happier and lead a better life if they say yes to what we're quote unquote selling them. So we all need to overcome this like fear and like negative feeling about the word selling, I think. So enrolling, we can also think of it as enrolling, right? So Ashley was afraid that people would think that she was quote unquote selling them something. She was afraid that they would get angry at her, that they would accuse her and not like her. Right. Exactly. Accuse her of selling, so there are all these fears like brewing beneath the surface, even though Ashley knew the truth was, man, my patients could really benefit from this. I really believe in this. This is honestly a great thing for them. So we said, okay, so are these the fears that you're believing? And she said, yes. Yeah, those are definitely the fears that I'm believing. Like people will think that I'm selling them something and all the BS, that we tell ourselves. And that's what was going on in her mind as she was trying to communicate with patients about PerioProtect. Clearly that's debilitating. That's not going to help anyone, right? So examined those. And then we said, okay, so Ashley's integrity statement, we're going to make a statement right now that is true for you, Ashley, that's going to question and hopefully pivot your mind from all of these thoughts that you're thinking like cyclically, and we're going to replace them with positive thoughts. So Ashley made her own integrity statement, and it's absolutely true. So the important thing is when we're replacing a thought, it has to be with a true thought, right? We can't like lie to ourselves like, oh, this is this and blah, 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 whatever. It has to be true. So it was absolutely true for her. So her integrity statement was something like, when I show up to work, it's because I really care about my patients. I want to do what's best for them. I want to improve their lives. I got into hygiene because I truly care. I do what's best for my patients by offering them the best treatment options first and empowering them to choose. I believe in what I'm doing. Like, and this wasn't like a brainwashing session. This was like, what am I actually here for? And she reflected on that and then wrote it down. That's all it was.
So I want to make a quick point. You've probably seen this quote and I love it 100%. Fear is a liar. Fear, we magnify our own fears. They get bigger, they get stronger, but fear is a liar. So the best way to replace those fears is with truths. So for Ashley, it was replacing all the things she was scared of with the truth of what the reality is. Like, she really cares. She knows what's best for them. She's here to do what's best for them. She's ethical. She's smart. She knows how to present it. Like, it's replacing all those scary thoughts with the true, real thoughts that kind of center you and bring you back to what you're capable of.
Yep. And I just pulled it up. I want to actually read Ashley's integrity statement. And just for the sake of transparency, Ashley's given me permission to share this. So we've talked about it before. And so that's why I'm sharing it. But she said her integrity statement was, I'm a motivated person who strives to remain positive despite my challenges. When I come to work, my intentions are I want to help my patients by figuring out ways to do what is the best treatment for them as individuals. At the end of the day, I believe that good rapport and relationships, accurate assessment, will result in high profitability. My patients' needs precede my earnings, and I'm in it for their ultimate good. So that addressed every little, piece and nuance of the fears that she's believing. And she printed this, by the way, and keeps it in her drawer, and she reads it every morning.
Yeah.
And since then, guess what the outcome has been? Of course, you know what it's been.
Right.
Her numbers are through the roof,
right.
And her, PeriProtect enrollment is like crazy now. And she's like one of the highest, ones using PeriProtect, enrolling PeriProtect, because it actually does help. And if I were on the receiving end, I would want to know that that's an option. So we kind of just discussed that. And I think it's important as providers to really, question this. And Charissa and I were just talking about, we're going to make this part of our, quote unquote curriculum, our integrity statements, because it needs to be.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's replacing the lies with the truth. And, think about how many times I'm a big believer in what you think and what you focus on is the direction that you go. So if you're constantly rehearsing these fears, these negative, these self-limiting thoughts, that's the direction you're going to go. Mm-hmm. And if you've been doing that for years and years and you don't know how to get out of it, this integrity statement is the best way to start it, and you do have to read it and look at it every day, mm-hmm. because that's going to be what changes the thought. So if you make that shift, you shift that perspective, then now all of a sudden we're moving forward with truth and positivity, and that's what's going to come back to you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think this is a good time, because I know, again, we've been talking a lot about Jay today, but Jay Shetty, one of the things he talks about is the way to get out of fear is to take action, because fear is paralyzing and it is hiding and you're kind of, stuck in a place. So the way to get out of that is by taking action. So this integrity statement is a great way to do that. Zig Ziglar said, fear can mean two things, the acronym FEAR. It can either mean forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. And so I think we've talked about step one is acknowledging what that is and where that came from, and, asking all the why questions and really getting to the root of it. And once you've gotten there, now it's time to take action. And whether that's changing the pattern of your thought process, like doing this integrity statement, maybe sometimes it's getting educated more, because maybe your thing is like, I'm scared people are going to ask me questions and I don't know the answer to it. So, getting to the bottom of, probably the root of that is I don't want to look stupid. Yep. Is okay. Well, if that's the reality and you don't know all the answers you need to know or want to know, okay, well, let's do some CE. Let's do some education. Let's get answers that you need so that you can feel confident in doing that.
Yeah. And it's important. It's so important to remember, man, in some of these spheres, we have the ability to become powerful and step into our power and not remain powerless, right? So if we fear, quote unquote, looking stupid or not having all the answers. So maybe we do need to actually go get CE. Maybe we do need to educate ourselves a little more. Maybe we need to read up on this. Like that's okay. Like, this is not about like sitting in the fear and just feeling like crappy and shitty and like whatever. Like, it's not about shame. It's like the only way through the fear is literally through the fear. Like, you have to face it, right, to get to the other side. So, but I think that it's important. We should do whatever is in our power to minimize that eventuality from happening. So I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to not have all the answers. I would rather be educated and know what I can know about this topic. So go educate yourself. So go get some help, ask for mentorship, ask for whatever. We've all done it. I've definitely done it. I still need tons of help and mentorship and guidance, every day in day-to-day hygiene. But then the other aspect of that is let go of the things we don't actually have power and control over. We don't actually have power and control over. We don't know all of the questions our patients are going to ask. No one does. No one's a perfect clinician. And guess what? The best response, I think, is the honest response. So when someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer, I say, hey, you know what? That's a great question. I don't know, but you know who I bet does? Dr. Dudley. I bet you she knows all about this. And you know what? I'm just going to go ask her for you so that I can get that answer. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about us knowing the answer. It's about giving the patient the resources. And even if I have to say, you know what, I'm going to email you about that. Who cares?
Right.
Like the patient just cares that they get the answer.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny you say that because just Friday I had a patient in my chair and she has a lot of allergies. She has autoimmune issues. She's got a lot going on. And she was asking me about, she just got done with some ortho. So she's interested in whitening, but she's got a lot of sensitivity issues. And so we were talking about all this. And she said, what do you know about those Luminex? Like have you heard of Luminex? I'm like, I have heard about it, but I don't know a lot about it. And so she's asking me questions. And I know her well enough. I've been seeing her for years that I like quickly pulled my phone. Like I'm just sitting chairside. I pulled my phone out and I'm like Googling, I'm looking up Luminex.
Yeah.
She's still talking to me. And I was like, I'm not ignoring you. I'm looking up Luminex. She's like, oh, no, we're good. So I'm looking through it. Well, she's already told me that she's discovered that recently that she has a lemon allergy, citrus allergy. So I'm looking and I'm like, well, one of the ingredients, because I was looking for the active ingredient, is lemon peel oil. And I was like, okay, this sounds like it's probably not a good fit for you. And that was like super cool. Like I didn't know the answer, but I'll quickly look it up. And there have been times before too, where like, I don't have time in that moment, but I'll email a patient later. Yeah. We don't have all the answers and that's okay.
Yeah, totally okay. And like, there's just, we're in the medical field, people, like things are always evolving, like it's always going to be the case that we don't know it all. Like think of trying to memorize all the medications that exist and how they change and all the side effects and adverse effects. No, they have apps for that for a reason, because we're not like human encyclopedias, our brains are pretty amazing, but no one knows everything. And that's the beauty of, Charissa and I lean on each other all the time for the things that we don't know. And also our friend Google too, our good friend Google and Jay Shetty and other people, that we need some help from. So,
when I think back to my background, and I know I've talked about this on a previous podcast, that when I first entered Atlanta Dental Spa, I felt very insecure. I didn't have a lot of confidence. I kind of felt like I was like faking it. And because I just felt like everybody around me knew so much more. And I was like, I don't know any of this. Like, honestly, I didn't really understand occlusal disease and all of that. Like, I was just like, what are you taught? Like you're saying words and I don't even know what that is. And I've been practicing for 14 years. Oh my gosh, I'm a faker. So one of the things that you can do when you've got these fears and these uncertainties, anytime you want to get really good at something, and again, this is a Jay Shetty thing, but anytime you want to get really good at something, you practice it. So I came across things that I didn't necessarily know or understand. And then I read up and I looked up articles and I used our friend Google and I learned more and then I practiced. And I'm really big on verbiage and like I've created all my own verbiage for pretty much anything I'm going to talk about. And I've thought it through and I've practiced and I've practiced and I've practiced, because that's how we really get good at things. So, one of our fears might be like, I'm not good enough. Like, I don't know all the things. Like, then figure out what you want to learn and know and get to know it and practice with your team, practice with your doctor, practice with your hygienist that lives, the state away, whatever that is. But I think that's how we're going to get better at what we want to do is practicing and not feeling like I read it once, now I know it. Like, no, it takes time and it takes effort, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think we all need to be a little more like gentle with ourselves, because I know, and this is about knowing who we are kind of in our automatic state too. Self-awareness is really important when I talk about this, because, it's kind of like if you're a person who procrastinates, then you don't want to like give yourself more reason to procrastinate. You don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to be gentler with myself and just like, take it easy and what. No, but if you're an A-type personality and procrastination is not what you struggle with, and you're aware of that you would address life differently, right? So it depends on who we are, kind of thing.
Yes.
So I think that's important, but what were you just saying? Because I had a point to make.
Oh, as far as practicing, like if you want to be really good at something, you've got to practice it. You've got to, take the time, invest the time, take the steps and practice.
Yeah, now I don't remember what I was going to say, but that's okay. I did want to touch on one more thing. And I think that honestly, this will be a completely separate podcast, but I just want to talk about, fear from a different perspective. And that is a communication perspective with our teams as well. So like, I think, this is definitely like a whole podcast. Like I said, I'm just barely dipping my toe into the water here, but there have been a couple times, when we would rather sit in our dirty diaper or sit in our rigid certainty than go to a team member and have an uncomfortable conversation, even though having that conversation is going to impact us negative. We're going to suffer slowly over time. It's going to be that death of 1,000 cuts, It's going to be like, oh, now things are awkward and everyone's passive aggressive because no one's just saying what they actually mean and meaning what they say. And we're all going to suffer slowly over time instead of just having this one uncomfortable conversation, facing it and moving forward, So this has happened in a couple of instances, well, many instances in our practice, because I think it's human nature to kind of like, oh, that's really uncomfortable, let's avoid that. But a couple of the things that I think of are, one, conflicts with team members, but also two, just having an uncomfortable conversation or asking for what we want before we decide to like leave the practice.
Right.
Or, and there have been two instances for me where team members have called me and said like, hey, I'm thinking of, I'm going to just be honest with you, like, I just want your opinion. I'm thinking of actually hightailing it out of here. I'm thinking of leaving because, I'm just not getting the benefits that I want. And I'm not getting the compensation or the salary or the kudos or whatever it is that the person like wants or needs. And I'm like, well, that's really sad. I really value you as a team member. Like, I'm really happy that you're on our team. I feel like you're strong at this, and that. Have you had a conversation with a person who can actually influence what's going on in that regard? Like, have you had a conversation with our COO or with Dr. Craig? Like, have you gone to them directly and like aired your thoughts? And a lot of times the answer is no. Well, no. I wonder how this could be resolved. And then it's funny because in two situations, I was like, just go have a conversation, because the worst that can happen is they say no, like, no, we're not going to do that. Okay.
Anyway, and they say no when you leave, then that happened.
Exactly. Yeah. Like that, literally you were going to leave anyway. So what's different about them saying no and then you leaving anyway? Like, at least now, and you explored that avenue and you got uncomfortable and went out of your comfort zone and asked the questions, but now you know the answer.
Right.
So I think that the fear thing can keep us stuck in a lot of ways. And by the way, both of those employees ended up staying, and both of them ended up getting most, if not all, of what they wanted, just because they asked and presented kind of like their value, because they were really valuable team members, So I, of course, that's a podcast of its own. We can dive into so many examples of that, I think. But it's just another way that fear kind of keeps us like stuck and sometimes just sabotages us.
Right. So I think I want to wrap up with this last point, because I think this is huge. If you're listening to this and it's resonating with you and you're thinking, I got some things I kind of need to work through. And obviously, acknowledging it is a huge part of it, but you've got to take the action to move forward. So what we don't realize is most of our fears are self-inflicted, meaning we're thinking about ourselves in the middle of all of it. So like, they're not going to like me. They're going to think I'm stupid. I'm going to look bad. I'm not doing enough. I'm not good enough. And it's all about me. It's this me filter. Mm-hmm. So the way to get out of that is to center yourself on your goal and your purpose. Our goal and our purpose as hygienists is to care for our patients, to give them health and wellness, and to give that choice to them and give them the option and the treatment for that. Right. So it's totally shifting your perspective to your why. Why am I here? So when you feel that feeling of fear of like, oh my gosh, they're not gonna, these perio trays and this SRP that they need, this is like $1,500. That's a lot of money. And they're not gonna like me when I say this. It's shifting that mindset to, wait a minute, this person has active disease. They have arthritis. If I don't treat this properly, this can make their arthritis worse. This is like a life-threatening issue that's going to change their quality of life. And I have the capability and the power to give them the choices they need to get healthy. And when you step out of, like, when you take that filter off of it's all about me, and you really are able to focus on what it truly is about, that's when you get through it. That's when you make the breakthrough. And when you do that, the more you do that, the more empowered you get, because all of a sudden you have patients who are so grateful because they are getting healthy, and they're referring friends and family because, oh my gosh, do you know what Brittany did for me? Like, I've never felt this good. Like, so it's the fear that keeps you from getting there. And then if you can step through that, you will find more and more empowerment and more strength. And I think it's a total game changer. It's taking yourself back to the why.
Yep. And I just want to say, we hope that this is resonating, and we think that this will resonate with so many hygiene and dental providers. We hope that this has made sense and shown some light on some of our common fears and our unique fears. I hope that you will be motivated to kind of like dig in and ask yourself the hard questions. But I do want to really encourage you, if you want more connection and you want more conversations like this and you want a deeper dive, we are having a live summit in Austin, Texas this coming July. It's July 9th and 10th at Lost Pines Resort. And we are like beside ourselves excited to see your faces, to meet you in person. So please come. Say hello to us. Please come take the deep dive with us. There's going to be a lot more where this came from. It's 2 full days of like really just hardcore everything having to do with hygiene practice and dental practice and culture and vision and goal setting and tracking and just so many incredible things. We're so excited to talk about it. But if you are at all interested in getting deeper with us or going deeper, getting more connected, you can visit bulletproofsummit.com. You can register there for the summit, and we already sold out of early bird tickets. So I know that they're hot right now. You know, we're really thankful for that because it's still really early in the game. But I just know that honestly, one, they're gonna sell out, which is a great problem to have, right? But I really want, if you're connecting and this is resonating with you, please come see us in person. You know,
Yeah.
we would love to meet you. Come shake our hands. Come give us a hug. Hopefully by then we're all vaccinated and we can touch each other again.
Right.
In appropriate ways.
And I want to add to that too, because July is, about 6 months away. So I don't want you to sit and struggle. If you feel like you're sitting and struggling, come check us out on our Mighty Network app, Bulletproof Hygiene, because that's a really great place to chat and ask questions. And it's a great community. We've got, several members. So it's not just, you're not just going to hear from Brittany and I, we can all kind of talk together. So check us out there as well.
Yep. Thanks for being here, everyone. We are privileged to be chatting with you. Can't wait to connect with you further. Have a great day.
Yes. Have a great week.